The game that I'm going to take a look at this week is this Joshua Hebrews versus Pagans, um, produced by ADMW Game Company. I think it was in 2001. I was quite interested in this game because of the topic. In fact, I had already designed my own game on Joshua's conquest of Canaan. Of course, mine was on an 8.5 and 11 hand-drawn map that I made point to point, but basically I used it to teach my grandchildren, my homeschoolers, about the conquest of Canaan. So it used cards and a few pieces that I made. I was really hopeful for this game, so I bought it, and I'll talk a little bit about what I found. First of all, has nice components, has a full-size map, but it is divided into 4 pieces, so they have to be set together to make one conventional style map. It's point to point, has the historical locations. It's very nicely done, and there are nice rounded playing pieces that represents counters that represent different strength points worth of units. One of the problems that I came up with, they're nice enough counters, but the counter mixes, I'm going to assume, was misprinted somehow, because there are some factions that do not have ones, so you can't break a 4 into a 3, because, or a 2 into a 1, because there are no ones. So you can't make change. So even with the setup, it was difficult for some of the factions. They just didn't have the, you'd have to hand, write in 1 values on some of the pieces to make it work, which is really unfortunate. It's basically a card-driven game. It's quite simple. The leaders have stands. The stands are not very good, so the leaders will fall out of them when you pick them up. So, but I don't know what else to say about that. It's basically a card-driven game, so the cards have events on them as well as an operation value, and so a lot of times the card will be used for its operation value to activate a leader to get him to move and use his movement points to attack or lay siege to a city. Some of the cards have somewhat historical events on them. There's a lot of things of like weather conditions, which in the book of Joshua are attributed to a divine cause. There's a card called Joshua Reads the Law, which has some benefits if it's used as an event. The pagans can play the Achan's Sin card, which is right out of the book of Joshua. The Plague of Peor is another card. Levites, Champion, it's a little bit reminiscent of Goliath. The game does have the Anakin in it as a part of a faction. There's a card of with regard to the Ark of the Covenant, the Extreme Sun, and things like that. So it does bring a historical narrative into the game. It's nice, but a lot of times the cards will be used either for their operational activation value or as a response to the other player playing a card. Outside of that, the events don't always come up as you would like. I'll also say that the setup was very difficult in this game. Even though it's a fairly simple game, the instructions were very difficult to follow. Some of the map colors don't match the factions, so it's difficult to figure out where one of the pagan tribes sets up, because the colors don't match at all. I mean, we're talking like the difference between light blue and white. So that's a fairly significant difference to figure out in setup. So if you know the history a little bit, you might recognize some of the ancient cities that were part of that faction, but very difficult. My biggest gripe, though, is the rule book itself. I'll show you. It's very difficult. It's ambiguous. I almost got the feeling as if the game was designed by someone who spoke a language other than English and somehow translated it into English. The ambiguities are really difficult, and it's almost in almost every section of the game there are ambiguities. I mean, it shows you the flow of play easy enough, the sequence of play and all of that, but getting into the details of how to perform such actions, so much is left out in the explanation in the rules that you really have to tinker. So if you're not a tinkerer, you're going to have a very hard time. If you are a tinkerer, you're going to have to tinker on every subset of this rule book. Every main heading has ambiguities that make it so that you have got to come up with a house rule or something to figure it out. And from that point of view, I was very disappointed. In fact, I'm not going to play this game anymore by the rules. I may use the components to use on the game that I originally designed. It's a completely different game, but it gives me a nice map and nice pieces, some cards that I can maybe incorporate, and I can write my own rule book for it, but a lot of people don't want to do that. So anyway, I'll say my rating of the game is based only on the topic, because every other aspect it fails at for me. So I'm really sorry to report that. I had high hopes for this, but some people are going to find it unplayable. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this look at Joshua, Hebrews versus Pagans. Have a nice day.